everybody. It's Monday, March 7th, and that means it's time for another episode of Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, Nonprofit Conversations. Unfortunately, Agnes can't be with us today. So on behalf of Agnes, I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our global audience. And thanks for joining us this week. I'm Cecilia Saup. I'm the principal and founder of Road Tulips Consulting, and I am also a host of this lovely podcast. Today, we are really happy to have back one of our regular guests and one of our favorites, Michael Butera, who is here to share his insights and observations on the topic of why nonprofit executives should volunteer. Welcome back, Michael. Would you like to say hi and tell the audience a little about yourself?
Hello, Cecilia. It's such a pleasure to be with you again. I'm happy to tell everybody that I'm part of your consulting network, and I have my own consulting operation, AssociationActiVision, and I'm really looking forward to today's subject.
Oh, thanks, Michael. I think it's a good one. Volunteering is something I always make sure I'm doing at least one volunteer project or filling a volunteer role. So what do you think is an important thing, or maybe you have three things that are important about why nonprofit executives should volunteer?
Well, let's start with one that I think is just missed all too often. Mm-hmm. In the world of the nonprofit, we are always looking for volunteers. You know, every organization needs people to do this and that, serve on committees and so forth and so on. And we say when we're learning to be good leaders and good mentors and good coaches, that the best way to learn is by doing something. So wouldn't it be to your advantage to be able to say to people you want to volunteer, hey, here's some of the things I've learned as a volunteer in other settings other than my day-to-day job, because that's really what you're asking people to do. So I think that's the first thing you got to get, it's kind of like a mindset change for everybody. Now, obviously, you're going to have a whole set of new meaningful connections that come from moving forward and working with other people. And I think that something you and I have discussed earlier is this idea of it should really help you understand the volunteer experience. We're always talking about this experience. Put the shoe on the other foot there, take on that responsibility. And it's important that you're not doing it, just within your typical zone. In my case, I've had an opportunity to serve on, I can't tell you how many committees, and there's so many opportunities for us as executives that both enhance us personally and enhance our organizational well-being. Mm-hmm. I've served on more governmental task force and groups than you can name, some of which have been a real learning experience. Recently, I chaired a commission on compensation review for elected officials. That's a learning experience.
I bet.
If you want to have. I've been on legislative committees. I've served on transition teams for governors in several different states. All of these things, not only, is it's about the experience and the new connections and all those kinds of things, it also helps you gain a perspective about what it means to be a volunteer, where you're not in charge.
That's right.
And somebody else is. And I think that's really an important aspect of how we move forward. And, you can be a little selfish about it too. And I mean that in a good way, not in a negative way. Think of volunteering as adding to your experience set and adding to your resume, things that you can tell other people. You may not last forever in your current position. You might want to fill in some gaps here and there. And by volunteering, whether it's, with your church, your community organizations, homeowners associations, we could go on and on with all the types. But we don't need to deal with the types today. What we really need to do is talk about the value that this brings to you, your role, and what it does for your organization as well. This nonprofit that you run, you have an opportunity to have a very realistic perspective about volunteering and how important it is to the well-being of our kinds of organizations. And here's another piece. It's amazing. You learn new things, but you also learn new skills. And one of the best skills you learn in volunteering is listening. We always talk about why it's important to listen to others. When you volunteer, you have to listen. You have to expand your view of the world. So all these kinds of things are wonderful. Anybody who's been on a homeowners association can tell you what it's like, because you don't see the community in the same way that everybody else does. And so when you volunteer to do that, you're expanding yourself and you're bringing real value, not only to you, but to your organization. So those are those are the big pieces, I think, that we want to put forward.
And I think, thank you for that, Michael. I think that's an excellent summary of the benefits of volunteering if you happen to be in the nonprofit management profession. Oh, gee, and so many comments were coming to mind when you were reviewing those. When you said something about in a way you can do something for yourself, and in a way it's selfish. I don't think that's a problem either. As somebody who adheres to certain objectivist tenets, I can recommend the book, The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand, because it's not selfish in that bad way. It's taking care of yourself and making sure you have what you need. And I think we've all had that advice at least once in our life. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people. So I think that's a really important thing. You also made me remember my dear departed mother. She was a stay-home mom because there were 7 of us. So she really didn't have much choice in that because there are too many kids. But seriously, she volunteered a lot. So she was always doing things in our neighborhood association, at our school, at our church. And when she did decide to go back to work, when myself and my younger sister were old enough for her to do that, her whole resume was volunteer experience. And she ended up getting a job working at City Hall in St. Louis, Missouri, because she had that experience. It was unpaid, but it was still experience. And so I think that's a really important point that you made. Listening to your list of all your different activities, and you had mentioned to me before about being on that commission about the compensation for the county officials, and that must have been really fascinating.
Oh, it was very interesting.
So, and then all the learning from that and using your skills from the nonprofit world to communicate with people. And boy, I've done a lot of different volunteer stuff too. I mean, I was really inspired by both my parents. My father was also a very active volunteer who's also dearly departed, unfortunately. He was active at the church and the school as well. And sometimes they were active politically. So they were real leaders in the community, and that inspired me because I grew up around that. And so when I was in high school, I was the teenage rep on our parish council. That was my first volunteer activity. And I also volunteered as the lawn sign coordinator for a political campaign. There actually was somebody who made sure everybody got their lawn signs. That was me. So there are so many different ways. And I think modeling that for our kids or the people around us is also important too. So when we're doing this, though, you touched on this. I want to explore this a little bit more with you about feeling what it's like to be a volunteer, because we work with volunteers. And I loved that you said you have to listen because you're not in charge. And so let's talk about that a little bit. So what do you think people learned from that, from being in that more I'm listening, I'm doing what I'm asked to do, as opposed to telling people what to do?
One of the great things about being in that position, and I mean, great's overused, but this is really a great piece, is that it puts you in a position where you must collaborate to reach a decision. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are decisions that only an executive makes. But the truth of the matter is that when you're there as a volunteer, these collaboration skills, this ability to work with others, to see things the way someone else sees it, and to find a solution that you can feel really good about as having been a part of it. Now, one of the things I do, everybody has their own methodologies, but when I volunteer, I like the journal. So I keep a kind of little list from my experiences of things I've learned and things that I was surprised by. You were just talking about this one that I recently engaged in compensation for elected officials. Now, I knew that some people think elected officials should do everything for free, but
Yeah,
it
right.
was amazing. It was amazing to find out all the things that elected officials are responsible for that, we in the public don't hear. And as we had that opportunity, I saw other people's views broaden as well. And so you say, hey, other people change too. And, in our world, in the nonprofit world, change is like, a catastrophe, no matter when it occurs, whether it's planned change or whether it's, oh my God, this thing just happened to us.
Yep.
So I really urge people to, not a fancy journal, just a little list. And in that list, you're going to find new things to read. You'll have people that'll say, have you seen this book? I was reading this book about X. And if, take a little bit of time to read that book and say, now I know why they think the way they do. The old thing about seek first to understand and then to be understood. When you're a volunteer, particularly as an executive, that's a fundamental piece. You have to understand the other before you put mouth in gear. So I think those are the kinds of things that you learn every time you have an opportunity to volunteer. Sometimes things are a little tougher than others. Because executives come with strong opinions. But the great part is you're not the person with all the answers this time. You're the person that has to help others develop the solution, the result. And by that method, you gain experience as well.
Exactly, because letting go sometimes of that control is a learning experience in itself and something of a relief. Although I and you've probably had this experience too, Michael. I know when I try to volunteer for things outside of our profession, people say, "Oh, you're a nonprofit executive. Would you do this like for free?" And it's like, no, well, wait, I'm a volunteer. So there's that too. So we have to try to find that balance of listening and setting boundaries, I think, because that happens to me quite a lot, actually. I think other people have it happen as well, where they.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I just said there are two sides to that. Yes, everything that you just said, but an interesting things happen for me. I can't tell you the number of times that it has resulted in work experiences for me. That is a new client that I would not have otherwise had. And what they liked about me is not what I would have normally sold to them.
Right, which is
interested
great.
in selling all my expertise. Yeah. So it's a two-way street, and I think that that's good for all of us.
Well, and I think, and I agree. Unfortunately, I have not yet had that experience, Michael. I hope that happens to me someday there where my volunteering leads me to some work. But seriously, I do hope that does happen for all of us at some point, especially for in the consulting side of our nonprofit management journey. But one of the other things, though, is that I wanted to touch on quickly is we also, by doing this, by volunteering ourselves and having that experience, we understand the limits to which we're getting pushed. And what I mean by that is like, if you feel you're being asked to do too much as a volunteer, you probably are. And so take that learning back with you as well, because you don't want your volunteers to think they have a second unpaid job.
Right. Well,
yeah, building what you said about people seem to think government employees and officials should work for free is like, neither should your volunteers. They should have a good experience. So,
psychologists tell us in research that volunteering, particularly for a cause that you believe in something, is actually good for your health. It has great mental benefits for you. And it can have physical benefits depending upon what the volunteering is, obviously.
Right. Well, it makes you feel good to help people. I think a lot of us do ad hoc volunteering and don't consider it that. Like maybe you volunteer to organize a meeting for your community with the police liaison or something like that, or you speak up on behalf of a membership segment of a group you belong in, that's volunteering too, because you're sharing what your time, your energy with other people. Not necessarily being because you were asked. You're doing it because you want to do it, because you think it's a good thing. So we're already at the end of our episode time. This is such a great topic, though. So I hope you all continue thinking about it and acting on it, learning from it. So, Michael, as you know, you've been here before. We like to ask our guests for a final thought they'd like our audience to take away. And then how could they get in touch with you if they wanted to talk more?
Well, my final thought for everybody is that in this time of great disruption that we're involved in today, this subject that we're talking about today is a way to really invigorate yourself. And so my final thought is that volunteering can invigorate you and help you, in your life experience, this journey that we're all on. And I'm happy to talk to anybody. The best way to reach me is at AssociationActiVision.com, or I'll give you my email address. It's Michael B, that's B as in boy, at AssociationActiVision.com. And thanks, Cecilia, for the opportunity to share time with you and all of our guests today.
Oh, well, thank you for coming back, Michael. We always enjoy having you, and I know you'll be back again. So that's it for this week. We have to go rogue for now, but we hope you'll subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google, and a number of other services. So you can find us on your favorite. If you want to learn more about Rogue Tulips and how we could help you, as Michael mentioned, he's part of our expert partner network. So we could all work together. You can check us out at roguetulips.com. If you're looking for CAE education, either getting ready for the exam or getting some renewal points, you can take some of our courses at the 501c League, and that can be found at the 501cleague.net. This week, I'm going to close with a thought of my own, which I don't normally do. Right now, the country of Ukraine is being invaded by Russia. This is obviously an act of aggression, and you may feel like there's nothing you can do. But take inspiration from the volunteering message we've shared today. There's always something you can do. It may not be a big thing. You may not be able to go repel the forces invading this country, but you can send a message of support. You can send money to the Red Cross or another charity that you'd like to support. You can contact your representatives and ask them to take action. You can not buy Russian vodka. There's a lot of companies taking those small actions because it's what they can do. Can do a thing, and that will help, because there's an old saying, many hands make light work, which relates to volunteering, but you can do a small thing, and all of the small things we do will add up to a big thing. Rogue Tulips has already publicly stated in our newsletter that we support the people of Ukraine. We stand with them and stand against the aggression they are currently suffering. No country should be invaded by another country, and we support that. So if there's something you want to do, please do it, because it will make a difference. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.